Hey guys, it's Gwynaire here from Defy Reality Entertainment, and today I'm going to be going through some Photoshop stuff. Photoshop has a huge part to play in the look of Neyyah and the style of Neyyah. It was actually a software that didn't really, I didn't start using until maybe 2020, around that time, towards the middle 2020, getting towards sort of just after, maybe it could have been about August, maybe around that time. Previously I was using GIMP, and some of the effects were great, that were working really nicely, and I've got various different posts on my Patreon. Best place to be for all things Neyyah related, game dev. I delve into Visionaire, Photoshop, Blender work, and some of those posts actually show some of the renders I had from like July 2020, and around that time I was using GIMP to really bring out certain details and colours and images, and they worked out really well. But I mean, feel free to prove me wrong. I'm not too sure that GIMP can basically do a batch render of, say, like 100 or 1,000 images using one effect to each image, so you don't have to do it manually. That was the one thing that worried me a bit, because what you're about to see is that certain things in Photoshop, they have to be applied to a particular scene that is in a certain area, and also, say there's an animation from that scene, those effects have to be added to each frame of that animation too. So for me, it's just going to be, a headache, basically, going through all those images, and manually going through each image and then adding the effect to each image. No. So I decided to go with Photoshop, and it works a lot better. The effects run really nicely, and I'm going to show you how they work for the images for Neyyah. So here we have a scene from the game. It's actually a scene that I took from my second computer, which is just over here, which is actually rendering something at the moment. So this is like the render computer. And so sorry if I do quickly get distracted on that computer, because it needs to keep going. It's always rendering with the thousands of images that I needed for this game. So basically I took a load of images from this computer and put them onto this computer, and I'm going to be adding this scene and all the other scenes around it in this particular area, set of the game into the engine soon. So this is part of the what's called the harbour zone of Finalizing Island, and it was actually one of the areas of the game. I've got another couple of images here I'll show you quickly. This one, neither of them have any effects added whatsoever at the moment. And it was about 2020, towards the end of 2020, that I was actually finalizing this scene. And this set is pretty big. It's a pretty big set. Basically, the effects that I add are part of what's called an action list. And you can see here all the different action lists that I've got for different areas of Neyyah. What's great is that for Finalizing Island, without going into too much detail, because it's all set pretty much in the same kind of area, the same sky, it basically only requires one action list to be played out throughout that image. So it's great, it works out really nicely. I can actually use the every exterior area for Finalizing Island will pretty much have this same action list. At the moment, it's actually called what is it? So many. Actually, this one here, this would be a good example to show you. Actually, this one here was the original one I had. I'm just going to apply this these series of different effects here, levels, hue, saturation, I'm going to go into a bit more detail about the camera raw filter as well, which is really useful on Photoshop. And but the saturation and levels are a big thing. Auto contrast actually really helps. But I'm just going to play this onto this image, and you'll see it change before your eyes. Eventually. There you go. So that was using a slightly older series of various different Photoshop effects, and I can apply it to this one as well. So it's great. You can apply it to any image as long as it works for the image. And again, it comes to the light, down to the lighting and the particular elements of that scene that will work for those effects. You know, you wouldn't apply these effects to an interior because it will just blow the entire picture out. You know, expose it to all hell, and it will look very messy. And I can show you an example of what happens when that happens, if it happens. And it does happen. Sometimes it does happen. So this is the old series of effects, and what I'm going to do quickly is just I'm going to zoom in on a particular part of this scene. Now, the only problem I was getting was this. I mean, that's pretty zoomed in anyway, so you're going to get a bit of pixelation. But even at, like, say 100, what was happening is this kind of fuzzy effect on the clouds in the sky, and it wasn't too visible on anything else. Like the rest of the image looked fine, but it was certain elements of those effects that were building up that were causing this problem. And what I did is I actually troubleshooted it, and I went through every effect from bottom to top, so the last to the first effect, just to see which one was causing this problem. And I managed to actually solve it, and it worked quite nicely. For example, I might have another image here that I can quickly use. Okay, I'm just going to use, just to speed things up, 8D, so I'll use 7D, which is the step back from that. So this one step forward, that's one step back. And what I'm going to do now is apply the new effects to these exterior shots, and it really worked. It worked really nicely, and this was actually a series of effects that I created late last year, and they just worked really nicely. Sorting out the sky, it made everything pop even more as well. Everything looked a bit cleaner. I'm actually calling it at the moment it's the Gefunkai Zone Exterior New, because it was used for the Gefunkai Zone of the game. Not really saying anything about it right now, but that's what it's called. Yeah, it was used for those images, and it just worked for that particular set. And I actually had this one here, Finalizing Island New Settings Test 1, for the other images, and found that it needed something else, because there was without the auto contrast, everything didn't pop as much. And it's really interesting because it's like a very subtle thing from a distance, but when you have the image up on the full screen of your computer, you know, that's the window into the world, and so it's actually those little details come out even more. For example, the sky in the other picture, it just shows up more, so it's quite important to get it right. I mean, you're never really going to get it perfect, but you know, I decided, hey, I'm going to run those Gefunkai Zone effects on these Harbor Zone images, and just see what happens, and the other zones as well. Not saying anything else about that. Try not to give anything here. Try not to give anything away here, guys. So bear with me. So yeah, we'll just run these updated effects on this image. Awesome. So already you can see a big difference in the image, and I'm going to go through a bit more about what these effects do. So, you know, without even zooming in, that's 66, so we'll just bounce this back to 66, go back to this one. So you got this render here that was done with the old effects, and then we've got this new one here. So already, you know, if we zoom back in, let's say like 120, you know, bring that over here, and then this one here, 120. I mean, even at a distance, you can see the effects of this fuzzy and slightly grainy, and then suddenly a lot smoother and cleaner. And it was actually a bit of tweaking to get this similar lighting effects to work for the materials of these buildings and stuff. It was kind of an eye thing. I had to work with my eye, and it didn't take very long to do, which was amazing. I was kind of, you know, these moments where you're shifting something or changing something that is going to make quite an impact on the game. It's always a bit of a daunting feeling, because you think, oh, do I really need to do this? You know, is this really something I should be spending my time doing when I've got all these other things to do? But yeah, so this was quite a cool moment, really, because it really, you know, it made me very happy to get rid of that fuzziness. So you can see, you know, fuzzy and clean, and you can see even in the buildings, because they're slightly different angles, but even the building kind of looks a bit cleaner too, but not too much. I mean, it wasn't really the building or the materials that were having any effect from this. I think what I tried to do is troubleshoot why this fuzziness was happening, and what I did, you know, what I do add to my renders is a distant fog haze effect, which basically helps for, I mean, here for example, if I zoom in on this image here, it basically helps create a perspective that things are further away. It creates a distance. I call it like a distance haze. You know, I've been told maybe it's a bit too much, or there's a bit too much fog going on, or I think it's just enough. I think it's fine, and it really helps define what's at the foreground and what's further away, especially when it's a 2D slideshow game, you know, with pre-rendered graphics. I actually had a tester recently who actually thought it was like a real-time game. It was in Unreal, but the way I'd set it up was point and click. So that was pretty cool. Like, you know, they thought that the game was a real-time game, and they were just clicking to go forward. So that was cool. So, you know, either way, I mean, I love pre-rendered graphics. I just love what Blender and Cycle's rendering engine can do. And yeah, being a big Riven fan, those graphics, they still hold up today. This is great. You know, this is like, going off topic a bit, I mean, the first time I opened Blender up and tested the rendering engine back in 2018, it was like, wow, these were like Riven-like style graphics I was seeing, like the realism and the clarity in the depth in the renders. Like, I hadn't really used a rendering engine like that before. You can find out again all this kind of stuff on Patreon. I used to use a software called Animator. That's what I started with when I was a teenager, and that had a more, you know, very basic scanline rendering engine that was inbuilt, and you know, the graphics weren't anything like this, and you could tell they were plasticky. They were just, you know, not very real looking. You could do things like change your volume shadows to soft shadows as well, and you could set the softness of the shadows, but then render time would be faster. Render time would be slower the softer the shadows were. With Cycles, it just kind of renders everything photorealistically. You know, what's the word? Ray traced, path traced graphics. So yeah, you can see the distance thing here going on. It really helps bring everything out in the image and creates a good perspective. So I thought maybe it was a problem with the mist causing this fuzzy effect, but in fact it was more of the actual effects themselves within Photoshop. And you know, I troubleshooted it and I found out ways to get around it. So I mean, again, I was quite happy about that. And just backing this out, we'll add the same effects, the new effects to this image. here you go. You've got, you know, everything pops more, whilst keeping that weathered, desaturated look. I don't want things to pop too much in this game. I always find that in the real world, things don't really pop so much, and basically Photoshop helps bring out the slight pops that are needed. You know, the colour of certain metals, you know, maybe a brown rust to a shiny chrome to a weathered wooden kind of texture, the blue of the ocean reflecting the blue of the sky, the clouds reflected in the ocean, they all pop more. And even on a scene like this where you're facing the sun, it still works. You know, it still works really nicely, and you get that really nice clarity and detail within the shadows as well, and the shady areas. And I can say now quickly that effect is usually created by a color temperature. You just drop in the color temperature a bit, and it creates like a cool look, and it works really well for shadows and shaded areas. You know, you take away the warmth, and then it just looks a bit more realistic. And actually, all the images have been, all the effects pretty much I use, even in some of the interiors, I believe. The color temperatures dropped a bit, and sometimes quite a bit, you know, depending on the scene. So I can actually open up, let's see, this first one here of the new effects. This is the camera raw filter, and I can show you. Obviously right now it's basically applying that effect again, so you click on it, it's actually applying it again, which is why everything's blown up, really blue right now, and looking a bit weird. But what I can show you is the basic effects being used, and you can see here a -9 drop in temperature. You know, so, I mean, you bring that up, you know, and everything just, yeah, starts to look a lot warmer. But you bring it down, this is not how it actually looks, because the effect isn't really working as it should, because it's being applied twice. But just having that drop just really helps. So yeah, going back to the original image that we had, you know, we've got the fuzzy sky, so we'll just close this one and we'll apply the new list of effects to this image. This is an image that I recently uploaded to Steam, the Steam page as well. Definitely wishlist Neyyah on Steam. You know, you'll be notified when the game is out, and yeah, it just really helps, you know, getting the wishlist count. And yeah, I mean, if you want to explore Neyyah and you want to have an adventure in this world, then definitely wishlist Neyyah on Steam. And if you want to see a nice behind-the-scenes view and journey of the game, think about joining up on the Patreon. There's some really exclusive behind-the-scenes content on there that delves into all sorts of things, you know, from the game engine to this kind of work, Blender, and eventually music and sound. And you know, I do everything for this game. So it's a journey, and it's been a journey in so many ways, and Patreon tells that journey better than anything else on social media. So definitely join up on Patreon if you want to be part of that. And there's some great rewards as well. You know, for $1 a month, you'll get your name on the credits of the game as a Patreon supporter. So you'll actually be in the game. Your name will be in the game. And I have some other amazing rewards as well. Really exciting stuff that, you know, isn't available anywhere else. So definitely take a look on Patreon and see if you want to join up, and might see you on the other side of that portal. Who knows? So this is the raw render of this scene, and I'm going to add those new effects. And here you go. So we have the smoother sky, it's much clearer. Also the blue and the colour tone works a lot nicer with these effects in this angle as well. Really pops. I mean, it's really beautiful. I actually had a guy who he's going to be helping with the portal transitions for the game. He helped with a few other things graphically. Zachary McIntyre, I've linked his YouTube channel on this video. Amazing guy. I think, from my perspective and in comparison to what I do, he's got such a technical mind. He's so technically minded, and some of the stuff he comes up with is just beyond what I can do or think of within Blender. And he really helped with the ocean look in Neyyah, and he actually assisted me with creating this horizon mist that you can see here that makes the clouds sort of disappear into the horizon, so it just creates a nice sort of depth. I'm just going to set up another render quickly, don't mind me. So again, I'm working on two computers, day in, day out, night in, night out. This computer here basically is used for rendering. So I use this computer to render all the images for Neyyah, and it's always rendering. It's always rendering all the images, and there's so many images, so it needs to be an ongoing process. It needs to keep going. And then, when I'm finished on here, or something else is rendering, I'll quickly jump back on the other computer. So I'm just going to let those files load quickly, and then I'll have to set up the renders. So, yeah, Photoshop is amazing. I think, pretty much requires maybe a few more videos, to be honest, to really go into the depth of what I do in Photoshop. But this shows you an example, of what Photoshop does for the images for Neyyah. I'm going to close those. I'm just going to open up another view of the game. So we have this angle here. I'm going to apply those effects again, and you will see, even if I can move the image just over here a bit, you will see the effects take shape. There you go. So already you have the sky popping out, you have the different metal shades coming out, the colours of the metals, the concrete, the brickwork, all sorts of things are popping out now. And it just gives it that extra style of realism, whilst keeping everything desaturated as well. And you can see here, if I could show you really quickly, you've got these different saturation effects. Funny enough, these hue saturations I only use to mainly brighten up the image. So I mean, by 3, a level of 3, which is not much, but it really kind of just helps. Sometimes everything looks too contrasted, and so these levels, these sort of brightness increase, the increase in brightnesses, they really just add that nicer softness to the image. I find that works really nicely. Brightness contrast, so you've got a bit of extra contrast there anyway. All sorts of things happening. But the one tool that I use the most is actually the camera filter, the raw camera filter. So I'll go back into our image that we had, and I'll just open the camera raw filter. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use this one effect to kind of bring out this image a bit more. So without all the other effects, I'm going to show you how it can be done. So we'll just drop the temperature a bit of the image. So already we're getting that blue coming out a bit more. Exposure I don't really touch, to be honest, unless something's blowing out a bit too much. Contrast, we'll up the contrast a bit. Highlights, we'll up that bit as well. Shadows, whites and blacks is something I use quite a bit here. I always find that depending on the image, messing around with this actually brings out the contrast of the image a lot more, maybe the shades of the metal, all sorts. It makes things pop a bit more as well. So already there I'm just bringing down the blacks. It's making everything else stand out more. See? Too much, it's too faint, you bring down the blacks, you've got that nice contrast in the image. Dehaze is not something I use much, but I have used it more often, especially with interior areas or volumetric lighting, sets that have volumetric lighting. And so this kind of works, you know, just to give a bit more clarity to the image as well. So you can take away any kind of, I guess, mistiness that Blender creates, and just, you know, makes everything sharper, makes everything pop out. You know, I might mess around with the saturation a bit here as well, but the main thing I do is actually work with the color mixer, and this is great. This tool is amazing. It's really worked well for exterior areas because it's enabled me to work with what I call more natural sunlight. So you take away more of the yellow, and you know, keeps some of that yellow in, but it makes all the other colours of the scene pop. So it's almost like it takes away the warmth a bit more, but it's done in a different way. I mean, the saturation, if I take out all the yellow, I'm going to end up with it's too desaturated, you know. But you start taking it away a bit, and you've got more of this kind of white kind of sunlight, sort of more natural looking sunlight coming out. And, you know, I might increase the blues as well, make the blues pop a bit more. There are so many different effects though that are needed to make things work really nicely. So you end up with that other image that I showed you of the render with the new effects, where everything's really popping. Already we see there's a change here, and you can, you know, illuminate certain parts as well, make things, you know, flash a bit more. I mean, if you could save different frames of this and just adjust the blues here, and then put that into, like, say, Visionaire, and then mirror those frames. So, you know, you could have a really cool kind of glowing effect with this blue. You know, it could just keep popping, but then it will affect all the other blues as well, which is the problem. It won't just work on that portal. You know, you'd have to do it separately. But yeah, it's a really cool tool using the color mixer. Really helps. So, you know, I'm gonna apply that, and already you can see a massive difference. Without, with, and I'll actually quickly go into that image again and apply our cool list of effects, and everything works together to create this combination of brightness, saturation, really upping the clarity of the image. And one thing I quickly want to show you actually before I finish this video is an example of how things go wrong in Blender. In Blender. So I basically use Blender 2.79. I know that's kind of crazy. You know, Blender 3.0 is out now, and you know, it's kind of weird to kind of be using such an old version of Blender, but this is the version that I used. You know, I've got it here, and you know, I've got it here. I can open it up. You know, and I use this all the time. I just use this to model everything. I can actually show you what scene I'm working on at the moment, which is one of the interiors. So yeah, this is the scene that I'm working on at the moment in 2.79, which is looking really cool. This is usually the way I work in Blender. I have part of the screen for maybe a render view, which gives me like a real-time render of the scene, which works really nicely, and having a fast computer enables me to really take advantage of that. And here I have my modeling solid state view. I might apply the effects. I could, you know, make this wider if I want to. here I can look at the the UV map of a particular model, and over here I've got my nodes and my shaders and my textures. So that's usually how I set everything out. I know how to work very quickly in this, incredibly fast. I use, funny enough, I use Blender 2.92 as my rendering tool. So I actually use that more updated version of Blender to render out the images, because they upgraded the way that Cycles picks up the light in the scene, and so you do end up with a slight, there's a very slight difference in the render quality of how the light is hitting everything. To be honest, I've actually got a way of rendering a couple of things really quickly in 2.79 and incorporating them into the engine, and you can't really tell the difference at all. So I find that, yeah, it's good to stay up to date with software packages, but if you know how to produce good quality stuff, and, if it's not broken, then, you could pretty much just keep using that, and you save yourself a lot of time, like having to start something new and learning something, especially like myself, having so many other tasks to do for this ginormous game. It's really nice to just, be comfortable in what I'm using, and then there will be a time where, I can jump into the newest version of Blender, or even learn a bit of Unreal or something down the track, maybe once the game is out, and then work on a second game and, prep myself for that. It's just, as long as the graphics and the vision are held nice and clear, I can, I'm comfortable working in this old version of Blender. And so yeah, I mean, one thing that happens with the with bringing everything into 2.92 is I actually have to load the textures sometimes. I have to reload them because they're missing files. So they're ran from external hard drives, and I actually have a problem sometimes where you can see here certain models lose their textures, and they end up as these white untextured models. They look kind of cool. They're like glowing white plants. If I apply that series of effects onto this image, they glow even more. So yeah, that's a bit of a problem. And there's actually a really fast way of being able to correct that without having to go back into the actual scene file in Blender and seeing why they're not reading, and then having to re-render the image. I mean, these particular images here in this particular scene of the game, they render. They're one of the longest images to render because there's so much detail. There's actually about between 80 to 100 million polys within this scene. It's a really big scene, and it's there's actually a lot easier ways to do things than re-rendering images. It's usually a Photoshop thing that can be just, you can just smooth things out. I'll show you a quick example. So if I go into 120, maybe a bit more. Let's go to a 250. And I use this little tool here, I believe, and I can select with Alt, I can select any part of this image and it becomes my brush. So for example here or here, it's a better example. This can't be done all the time, but for things that are like far away, it's not so noticeable. I can click here and start painting out this plant, and it looks like it's just the rock, it's gone. I've just painted the rock back into the image almost of what was behind the plant. And so this is just a really nice, easy, quick way to get rid of like glitches like this in Blender. So, there'll be a few of these to do, but yeah, that's a sort of insight into the world of Photoshop and how it's used in Neyyah. I'll be doing a few more videos down the track in Photoshop, that's for sure. for different scenes, maybe interiors, and I've just touched upon exterior here, but there's so many different action lists for different areas of the game, So I would like to delve into those a bit more down the track, and keep you updated for any changes that happen as well. The great thing about Neyyah, and the most exciting thing about Neyyah, is that it's always evolving. Since 2018, the game has changed so much. It's kept its style and story mainly, but even that's evolved because of certain things. Computer upgrades enabled me to do more things, so the story then evolved more, and I was able to bring more into the world building elements. For example, this scene here, I wouldn't have been able to do this if it wasn't for my computer upgrade back in 2020. So, it keeps things exciting for an indie game developer like myself, and not just the changes in the story, but being able to do all these different things within different tools, and working in Photoshop, working in Blender, working in Visionaire Studio 5, and all these different programs that I'm using. It just keeps things exciting and really fulfilling. And so it's great now being able to work on this game full time as well, and it's just amazing. And yeah, thank you to everyone who's watched this video. I hope this inspires you to maybe create your own games, or go into any kind of creative endeavor. One person can do it. You just have to have that passion and that fuel and that motivation and that vision to really push forward and get things done. And I've been doing this now since 2018, and it hasn't become boring. Like, now and again there'll be moments where I'd rather be doing this in the game than this kind of thing, but it's just exciting all the time. It's just exciting seeing everything grow and into the engine, seeing more of the world, being able to explore more of the world within the engine, and seeing the renders come together. It's just seeing a render into the world that you're creating, the window into the world that you're creating, come to life on the screen. It's just amazing. It's just a really magical feeling, and I can't wait to be able to show Neyyah, the entire world, to you guys, and for you to explore it. So thank you for watching, and like, subscribe, and join up on the Patreon page if you want to help donate towards the game, towards the full-time development of Neyyah, and be part of the journey. Some great rewards again, to all patrons, and wishlist the game on Steam as well. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys.